So perhaps there's a way that can help people like us with OCD, especially people with these forms of OCD that we have, that is kind of just very, very whack-a-mole and is completely just unsolvable and unfixable by many, many of the methods. And throughout my time of actually researching the methods, it's like I keep hitting a brick wall. I don't really know what exactly it is and why that's the meaning that I keep getting, but it's like I've tried many of the hitherto methods available for OCD, and the complacent methods like ACT or CBT or even inference-based therapies, and I've really tried my best in actually solving and going deep into the deep end of actually finding out exactly what these methods will entail. And it's as if there's a couple things that I physically just can't seem to address. And one is, whilst I'm trying to do these remedies, I mean, the general approach to OCD is, I think, can be best thought of as it approaches the general populace. Like, if you think about anything that we're doing in life, they target the common stream, 50% of the bowel distribution. And it's like everything the outer ends of it is like those people getting completely ignored. And these are usually the people that need the most amount of help. And I think I'm such a person. Um, it's difficult because if you're struggling with insomnia, there's really nothing that medicinally you can really do. I mean, you can look at it yourself. I mean, if you look at the DSM-5, you can realize that. Sorry for actually just wavering and hiffing a bit. I'm just doing a bit of coffee here and taking a sip of it here and there. So just forgive me if I do take a sip of coffee. It's just genuine conversation, so just ignore it. I'm just gonna quickly take a sip of it and then continue talking. All right, it was good coffee. Anyways, so the big thing is I just really struggle because I'm being OCD. I want to do everything correctly. That's part of my obsessions. I know people differ in terms of, but I think every obsessional person usually have this thing with. It's not necessarily the symmetry obsession that they might have, but they have a sense of duty to their OCD and getting better, and that might also involve they do everything perfectly. It's just part of OCD, and I've realized that with my OCD that I want to do the procedure perfectly. I want to find out the best way I can perfectly do it and completely just overcome this thing. And I know it's always good to aim for a B and a B minus rather than an A plus, but it's like you just want that A plus. You want to do that also. You want to do the process completely just pristinely without missing anything, and it makes it so difficult. And I mean, even the former time of this year, I was an absolute student. I was a massive whiz in going into different just these philosophies and these physical mythologies and just trying to find out exactly what's going to work for me. So I stumbled upon ACT and also current other treatment and lateral treatment modalities such as inference-based therapy and metacognitive-based therapy. The textbook for metacognitive-based therapy was sent to me. It was actually by I can't remember exactly. It was a German guy, and he sent me the textbook. It was from a German publisher, but anyways, that book was very badly outlined. It was just horribly outlined. Like I couldn't follow exactly the modality. And as somebody with OCD, it was just extremely difficult for me to follow exactly the modality. I think the book was mainly aimed at clinicians. I don't know why books aimed at clinicians are so horribly unedited and outdated. It was things that were cut and pasted. The format was horrible. It was like it wasn't paraphrased. It wasn't. There was no familiar system or format that you could essentially there was no footers. I don't think there were any footers in the specific document that made it so difficult to even have a reference or a specific an archival, and it just made it very difficult in a way to essentially consult for help because I think it was in the middle portion that they started talking about meditation, and it was just really difficult. Like if I get a book like that, I'm just or a guide like that or corpus, I just throw it out and I just want to go to something else. That's just me. I don't want to waste time to go through materials and huff through materials to be able to get to help. It's just so I'd rather pay for a 100-page book that's very condensed and just get the help, and that's mostly what I did. So, anyways, I can't remember exactly what it was, but if you Google it, you get MCBT, Metacognitive Based Behavioral Therapy, and the meat of it is I'm going to just discuss why I struggle with the modality about or around these approaches. Now, the general approach to OCD is CBT and ACT. Sure, but they also work and target, the common OCD types. And the problem is when you have these outward spur of OCD, things like hyper awareness OCD or sensory motor. The thing is, the average OCD methodology didn't get tested on the out, the externals. So I do think it's a problem. Like, I don't believe, or I don't suppose that every condition of OCD is treated the same way, albeit whatever you're suffering from. I think you have to tweak the approach. And I also think if you were to tweak it, there will be specific vernacular changes in each and every approach that will make it that will forfeit the average approach completely. Maybe, if not just a little. And if you actually go with this philosophy, you kind of understand why, if you're at the upper and the lower echelons of suffering from OCD, according to the bell curve, whatever you want to deem as upper and lower, the point is, if you're going to the extremes, you're varying your approach, meaning that you need a new approach completely. You need a completely new approach that can affix you to a new modality. And it just that the old modality, it doesn't, like, it's not that the old modalities fails, but it's rather that you need a new approach, you need a new specific blueprint for your condition. And that's why I think that when people like us go to the common approaches of solving their OCD, they go through ACT, they do the mindfulness-based training. It's not that it doesn't work, but it's like, you approach it in the incorrect manner, because there's things that just don't get attended. And the thing with OCD, and what makes it so extremely just nauseous, is you need to do it the correct way. So if you leave out specific tools, if you leave out specific training materials, you're going to struggle to get better. Um, Sleep OCD is a lesser form of OCD. Hyper awareness OCD is a lesser form of OCD, and these two are quite mutually inclusive. If you look at the majority of reasons people can sleep, it's usually a hyper awareness. It's usually a hyper awareness issue around their breathing or the inability to fall asleep or something. So what's interesting about insomnia OCD or OCD related to sleep anxiety is you can see there's a pattern. You can see that there definitely is a pattern when it comes to someone who struggles to fall asleep, and that person being aware of their breathing or their blinking or something, maybe their eyes moving behind their closed eyelids. You do see a lot of people with sleep anxiety purport specific reasons that do seem to resemble that of people with hyperawareness OCD, including myself, and I've seen it so many times now. And that's why insomnia or OCD related to sleep was something that I found was very easy to traverse into because of the foundation of hyper awareness that I've had. So again, I'm not making absolute statements here. I'm not trying to be undemonic, because I know that, of course, people do different. There's a lot of other reasons people would have insomnia, including chronic pain. But I do think anxiety really makes it all the more difficult to deal with it. And it's difficult because, yes, if it weren't for anxiety, if you can just dislodge and relax with whatever you had, you would fall asleep, even if you had pain, even if you had trouble. You would eventually fall asleep. You won't resist your body. But with anxiety, anxiety is extremely deep. And I notice it when I lay in bed and I have a small slither of anxiety around my eyes, or around even thinking that I'm in pain. Just that thought can keep me awake the whole night. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that people can go through war zones and essentially fall asleep in the middle of a battle, and you have this small, just completely just innocent kind of thought, half innocent, half evil. But it doesn't really have an impact on you, but you can't fall asleep. It makes no sense, right? But it's just one. I would also say it's a battle for me. Like, I don't really know what to do. I have pivoted off a bit. Let me just quickly go back to the original thing that I talked about, treatment modalities, right? So I'm not saying with this video that ACT is wrong, that CBT is wrong. I'm just saying that before you approach this, you have to approach it in a different manner. Like, for instance, when you think about mindfulness, it's really just it's a bombshell, almost like a golden elixir of truth spilling. Like, if you think about it, really is a magic bullet. I don't know if a better way of saying that, but ACT and mindfulness is a magic bullet. If you the, to me, just the ability to be mindful and to accept with whatever life gives you is indeed it's a magic bullet. And I do think the ACT approach would eventually work for people, but I think there's a bit of a corollary. Here it is. It's not easy to assemble such a treatment modality from the point of view that you're really struggling with specific forms of OCD. And with this, I mean the treatment modality of ACT doesn't make sense in specific frameworks as much as with others. And just as approaches differ amongst and across the board and the spectrum and amongst people, you also probably will have to think about tailoring your specific approach and gearing it toward a specific form of suffering. And I don't think it's being done. And the worst case is there aren't enough of OCD specialists, so we don't see there is a shortage of OCD specialists. I'm saying this. There's a shortage of OCD. If you think there's a shortage of engineers, lawyers, actuaries, think again. OCD specialists are few and far between. I think there's two in my country. Two, and they're overbooked. They book like 3 months out. You only have one consultation with these people. There aren't enough OCD specialists. People know enough about it. Even OCD specialists within themselves is a subfield. They don't know too much about other forms of OCD, let alone hyper-awareness OCD, let alone, you know, body dysmorphic and other forms of OCD or existential OCD or even other, overlappings between OCD and other anxiety disorders. So that's the big problem is even in OCD spectrum, there's a discrimination amongst what people who can treat OCD or otherwise prescribe to treat them or OCD conditions can actually know and do actually know. And to me, I don't know I don't know when the bell will toll when the breach will essentially breach the gap between what we know and what we don't know in regards to OCD. I think it could take even a decade, if not more, between people really start to catch up onto. I believe now if you actually Google sleep OCD and hyper awareness sleep OCD, you actually find a couple results being pulled up at Google. But eventually, more people will start to struggle, and people will start catching up. This is a real thing. It's real. Sleep OCD is a real form of OCD that can hijack your sleep. It's not just a separate form of OCD. It's about potential. It's an anticipatory form of OCD that only happens during the night. I mean, that's the case with me. My sleep OCD only gets worse at night. I don't really worry too much about the day at this point. Now, it used to be different and more difficult during the day, but I don't know when eventually OCD specialists are not going to prescribe insomnia or OCD, insomnia related OCD to medical doctors in the form of having to be treated with CBDI, because CBDI wouldn't treat sleep OCD at all. Sleep OCD has a thought-based problem. You're not going to treat. It's like the apples and oranges comparison, right? It's like something's rotten in the state of Denmark. Well, are we going to use a fire extinguisher? No, right? We have to do a bigger scale project. Same thing with sleep OCD. We're not going to solve it by saying treat it with CBDI, no caffeine. Yeah, certain things are going to make it better, but what I personally found is caffeine didn't really have an effect. The major problem with it is because it's OCD related, you're going to struggle with your thoughts. And your thoughts need to be addressed. It's plain and simple. There's no other way around it. CBTI is not going to work. There are some instances that can, but it has to address OCD if you think about it. Like if you're just saying drink a glass of milk before bed, take a magnesium pill, you're just going to tire yourself and you're even going to make your sleep worse. What I found is journaling helped me, for instance, not least because it really helped anxiety, but it also anticipated it's also kind of exposure. So journaling can also be a part of it. So here I'm talking about smart ways of exposing yourself to your OCD without actually going to ERP. Now, journaling is really one form of exposure you can use, so you have to use it. You can physically expose yourself through journaling alone. I'm going to get into that in a future video, but yeah, the thing is with ACT, with CBT, with general cognitive behavioral therapy is they fall short. They just fall short. And I think what I felt, I didn't really have all the reasons why not, or why they should, or why it didn't work for me. It didn't always make logical sense. I didn't actually go deep enough into why they failed. But what I would say is that they do fall short in preliminary ways. One is that because you can't potentially expect one modality to work for everything across the board. And it's not that it would fail or that it's something wrong with the modality, but instead it would be that the modality need to be tweaked for more severe cases. We see it with every other example. I think there's even a philosophical case to that. It's actually called the argument by abduction. You can't really abduct, a general metric and say, well, every nail can be hit with a hammer, right? It's the general hammer nail analogy. We take a hammer, we hit a nail. But you know what? Some nails are bigger, and what's the definition? What do you call a big nail versus a small nail? What there's a size, it's size indiscriminatory. You can get any size nail, let alone how large it could be meters large. A nail is a nail, large or small. And you can take any hammer, but you won't necessarily be able to hit the nail on the head because the hammer is just too small, or it's just too big, or just misses the nail, right? So any modality fails to the scene for the fact that it misses it misses its cells at its extremities. If you analyze it at its extremities, it will miss marks. And you need to pothole that. You need to kind of fix it and affix it and use some form of semi-plastic or plaster to be able to fix those holes. Just like with anything. It's not that you've got to throw out the hammer, but just plaster it at the ends. Make sure that you go take your anvil and your hammer, another hammer of course, and just temper the steel a bit. Ensure that you enhance or augment the steel or the blade, the essential, the surface area, so you can extend it to actually accommodate a bigger surface area. So the same modality is going to be used for OCD. It's not that mindfulness in that ACT doesn't work, but we need a new way of actually treating it, because the basis of it is ACT and CBT is not mutually, it is not mutually inclusive. ACT and CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, has some differences, and of course there are similarities between the two, but there are clear differences and stark differences also. One is the treatment of uncertainty. In ACT, for instance, uncertainty doesn't really get addressed. You learn how to live with it, whilst in CBT, uncertainty gets addressed. You address the problems of uncertainty, and that to me, the CBT way seems very logical, because in a way you look at Socratically, according to the board of your reasons of why you fear, and you try and address each fear. But the problem is the fears can get augmented, and you can potentially address a fear in the middle of the night when you're waking up. You need another modality, so you have to get more confident with the uncertainty around your fear, and that's why the two has to work in complement to one another rather than alone. Right, so actors are rather new. It's less evidence based, because of course there's not enough evidence, but it looks good, and it works for most people. But I don't think it can't work. I don't think it's impossible to work for each and every case, but I do think you need to tweak it. And I think the general modality behind ACT works because it has to work. I mean, for you to overcome OCDs necessarily, in a way that you have to get used to the problem of uncertainty. You have to get used to uncertainty, essentially. I don't really like the term getting used to uncertainty, because it means that there's something you have to overcome. I think there's a better way of kind of saying that without saying that. And I think it's more about getting used to, essentially just getting used to life, getting used to the ability to live without fear, getting used to the ability to live with possibility that anything could essentially happen, but not necessarily acclimatizing yourself to the mere possibilities that it may or may not happen. And I think that's where uncertainty comes in when people say get used to uncertainty in the therapeutical sense. So getting better means, yes, you need to be able to get used to uncertainty. However, what I find is when I try getting used to uncertainty, I just amplify my anxiety. And when I don't do my compulsions, I amplify. Like in the middle of the night, I just physically just can't feel okay with the uncertainty that the eyes are damaged. The mere thought of it is just too much for me. I don't know why not. Um, I can get my anxiety down to a baseline level. Let's say I do exposure therapy, I can get it down to a baseline level, but then the fear is still enough to keep me awake. That's the thing. It doesn't drop below the 0 point. It doesn't drop below the needed 0 point that I need to actually acclimatize myself to a new environment. So the main problem that I have with this specific fear is definitely that I can't physically get used to that uncertainty for some reason. And I don't know why not. I don't know what exactly the reason necessarily is why I can't, but the thought that I have developed a bug in the system, that I've been able to kind of identify a bug in the system, is too much for me to bear. Because I definitely think that I have investigated and probably suspected a bug in the system. One is in the situation where the eyes are injured, right? then the body shouldn't, the mechanics of the body is incorrect, because in that case I found that I shouldn't be moving, but they do. So if the event can be true, let's say my eyes are injured, that's just my OCD, yours might be different, then you're sitting with a problem because you got to stop your eye movements. But how do you stop your eye movements trying to sleep? Because they do always move. Now, the major problem is it leaves it open to evaluation. Now, of course, it's clear why somebody might have OCD around it, right? Including me. If this problem happens and I get an eye injury, I wouldn't know what the hell to do, because I won't be able to really get to sleep, because I will be too concerned on keeping my eyes still, but it won't really be possible for me to do in the first place, right? So I have this fear galvanized around my eyes and moving my eyes. And then the next necessary step is my OCD is like, well, did you harm your eyes? If you harm them, then you're sitting with a problem now because you can't move your eyes anymore. So the crazy thing about this is my eyes, I don't know why, but I've always had ophthalmophobia. I think it's the fear of eyes in general. But it was more distinct. It was the fear of losing my eyesight, or the fear of harming my eyes more specifically. And I think I've had this lifetime fear. Some people develop fears in different respects, but this is a lesser known fear. Um, I don't really know why I still have this omnaphophobia or whatever. I used to study eyes when I was like 13 years old. I had a whole book of biology surrounding, or rather, a whole book on physiology about the eyes, and I was really just obsessed with eyes all throughout my life. And I guess um, everybody's fears are different, but the main thing I wanted to get to is that when it comes to OCD, it's like whatever seems to work for average people just do not seem to work for everyone. And that's why there's so many treatment modalities. That's why there's so many attempts to to twist CBT into a new fashion. That's why IBT exists. That's why MCBT exists. Because it has to exist, because CBT just fails. At the seems plain and simple. And we can't always know why. Some people respond paradoxically, but some people do respond paradoxically. They don't respond as well to certain modalities. And again, I'm not saying the modalities fail by philosophy, but they fail by implication alone. They fail by the ability to be applied to that specific person, or that specific situation, or that party, or that entity. And that's how they fail, essentially. And it means that you need to do more research. It means that we need to be able to tweak the mode or the specific approach differently. And I don't know what actually else to say about it. So this is just my problem with OCD, my specific form of OCD. Is I really struggle to see how I can be okay with uncertainty around this specific situation, because I really fear, I've sustained an eye injury, and I do have this hyper awareness around my eyes. And I do also have the question that my mind is producing my, essentially doubts around, do I worsen pain when I move my eyes? Things like, do I actually worsen the condition? Can my can I actually cause pain by, is the injury still there? These thoughts do come up, and it's blatantly difficult for me to deal with these thoughts at the same time as trying to sleep. And yeah,